Streetlights by GhostWalker93. When I was young, me and my family would always go on vacation. It was one of the many things I looked forward to as a child. There was nothing better than getting away from the house and really seeing the country. Since my mom and dad had well-paying jobs, no expense was ever cut when it came to our family vacations. The only drawback was the long car rides. My mom was terrified of airplanes, which I guess made sense to someone as paranoid as her. Like any vacation, the length one would spend in a car could span to quite a few hours. Being the young boy I was then, it was no surprise that it quickly became nothing more than a boring, enclosed mobile home, leaving me, my parents, and my older sister nothing but conversation and the sound of tire rolling over various pieces of asphalt. I'm sure you've been there, who hasn't, right? The conversations stop at some point, silence takes over, people resort to their iPods and cell phone games and kinda coast along. I was more of a daydreamer. Maybe it's just me, but like clockwork, once the sun came down and the night took the sky, leaving only the illumination of streetlights to see, other than the other cars on the road, a weird game seemed to always pop into my head. There never seemed to be any real goal to this game, but I imagined something chasing me, and it had a set of rules that it had to do it by. First, it had to be night, because the sun would burn its skin off and kill it. Second, it couldn't be on the road. It had to run on the sides of the road, away from anything that would show it. And lastly, it could only travel off the ground, by leaping from streetlight to streetlight or through trees. I caught myself playing this game almost endlessly, as if I had just got a new Game Boy and wanted nothing more than to play it all day and night. I was never bored, nor was I ever really satisfied, as if the repetition of doing the same thing was both fun and boring, yet oddly satisfying. I had played this game many times. As I said before, my family went on vacation a lot. Maybe I had developed an odd interest in the game, but I landed on one specific goal of it, which seemed to be not losing track of what chased me. It was a game of imagination, and I would stare at the streetlights and the trees at the side of the road. Oftentimes I found myself counting, almost holding my breath when I lost count while I frantically fought to remember my place in the sequence of numbers. It went like this. When the game started, I would choose a streetlight, and as the car continued forward, so would the creature chasing me. With each streetlight that we passed, I would count to 5. And if we had made it to the next light on the count of 5, then I would see a figure above, jumping from it. That was the game, and this is what I did for hours on end. However, when my counting was off, I remember feeling panic. This happened from time to time when traffic slowed and I was forced to either count over 5 or stop altogether. I would break into a cold sweat each time this occurred and feel as if I was frozen in time with how long each second seemed to drag. My heart would beat out of my chest and my hands would become damp and clammy. It would stay this way until we made it to the next light, and then it was like a breath of fresh air. And again I would resume counting. I played that game for the last time last year, on my 17th birthday. It started as it did any other time, starting at the first light and then the counting to 5, catching the occasional glance of the creature before it leapt off the post to the next, my familiar time waster. Though, A few miles into the game, traffic stopped. Yielding to a collision, 2 gasoline trucks had collided, blocking the exit to the highway. The counting had stopped at 4. I felt the build-up only moments after I realized what stopped us. My palms went clammy and moist, my heart began to pound, and the panic set in. We weren't moving for a while, so I knew I had to calm myself down. It's just a silly game, I told myself, rubbing my wet hands on my jeans. I looked down at the street to see the light pole I would have stopped my count on, measuring the distance that was still required. I followed the pole up to the light's surface and fell into shock at what I saw at its peak. The creature was parked at the very back of the light, its face barely illuminated by the moonlight. There was a moment where I felt as if I had left my body. Everything went silent around me. No horns from angry drivers, no police sirens. Perfect silence. The creature leapt from the streetlight and stood at a distance from the road. It stood there in stillness, a statuesque monstrosity from my own imagination. I hoped. Hell, I prayed. I watched in horror as it raised its hand and waved at me, as if simply giving a friendly hello, until noise busted my eardrums at that moment, and the creature came into full view, just as an explosive roar enveloped the road and all upon it. It stood there, its eyes hollow and black, face burned completely off, leaving a fleshy view of gore. Lips were burned away in most spots, like the nose, teeth visible back to where they started on the jaw. And as the gasoline trucks exploded, fire burning away the cars on the nearby freeway, it seemed to give one barking, hoarse laugh. I awoke later in the hospital, and my life began anew. For the first few months, I wore bandages across most of my body, and my limbs refused to work quite as well as they had previously. I didn't feel much pain, a thankful side effect of both medication and missing nerve endings. And with this trauma came another, as a caseworker informed me one day that my family hadn't survived. I was the last of them, but still I stayed resolute. I would get better, overcome this horrible tragedy, and make a life for myself with the blessing of what my parents had left me. And then the day came to remove my bandages. The body came first, allowing me the awful sight of what this accident had done to me. But I had no greater shock in my life than when I saw my face for the first time in months. Burned, with my lips somewhat melted away. I looked as if I would fit right in, hopping from streetlight to streetlight, behind a bored young man and his family. I started screaming then, and even now, speaking with you, I'm unsure that I ever really stopped.